Yeah, Kevin. I mean, this one, as far as a show, a podcast, I don't even want to call it a show because we're not trying to do a show. We're just trying to pay homage to Wyndham. Basically, in case you've been out of the loop, as of yesterday, Bray Wyatt, Windham Rotunda's passed away, 36. He wasn't 80, he wasn't 95. He's in the prime of his WWE career. It's just, well, it's a shock to everyone, to state the bleedingly obvious. So we figured what we do with our show, our podcast, whatever, use that as, I guess, a platform to, express our gratitude towards Wyndham. The person, the performer, and do a little sort of bio piece on him. Because a lot of people are doing their tributes, and a lot of people are sharing their stories, and we figured with Elite Heat, what we do is something similar. Because it's fitting. The SmackDown tribute shows, going on as we speak. We're going to do this, so probably after SmackDown or sometime next coming days following SmackDown, you guys can have this to sort of listen to as well. But yeah, Kevin, I guess first and foremost, how you doing, pal?
I'm good. I'm as good as I could be. How are you, pal?
I mean, as is the case with most people who are into this wrestling, so not great. Like obviously I didn't know Wyndham great on a personal level, but part of me, and I'm sure yourself and many others, like when you grow up or when you just watch generally and see a wrestler's like whole career in front of you, you watch their character, their persona, you watch them flesh out, them develop in front of your eyes for literally a decade, and then all of a sudden, boom, as he has 4 kids, a partner, and all this, the years of his career ahead of him, he's just gone like that. Um, Unbelievable. It's just like obviously a shock to everyone. I don't know. How do you want to start this off, pal?
I don't know.
I don't have much.
I don't know. There's not really much to say. I know one thing is that when you look at a guy like Bray Wyatt, he's somebody. Realistically, he's one of the biggest homegrown stars that WWE has made over the past decade. He debuted in 2013, and he was a constant in the main event, upper mid card scene, having top notch storylines, high profile feuds, high profile moments with all the biggest stars. He was a prominent figure in everybody who watches WWE. He's a prominent figure in their life, whether they loved him or they didn't like his character, or whatever the case may be. Bray Wyatt was still there, and Bray Wyatt was at the top of his game. He was literally just in a match, like at the Royal Rumble, in a match with LA Knight, a high-profile story. He had just made his return late last year after being off for some time, and he was hitting his peak. He was hitting his pinnacle. He was going to do new things under the Triple H regime. He was going to hit a new level, and we never got to see that. We never will. It's kind of unfortunate. It really does. It does suck. It's not a great day to be a wrestling fan. Just on the heels, like now, the Bray Wyatt tribute show is going on right now. It's very emotional. It's not very often that you see a wrestling superstar die while they're still being a wrestling superstar. And we often hear so many times, "Oh, this wrestler died, but they're usually retired." Like Terry Funk passed away too. We got to mention that Terry Funk passed away this week. Terry Funk is one of the absolute most influential wrestlers to ever live. Terry Funk is your favorite wrestler's favorite wrestler. He's inspired countless guys, Mick Foley being the most prominent. So to lose Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt within the span of like 72 hours, 4 days, 5 days, however long it was, it just doesn't feel real. It's insane. It really is. It's like, and then we lost Brody Lee too, less than 2 years ago. Bray Wyatt's best friend. If you would have told me in 2013 that 2 of the 3 original Wyatt family members would be gone a decade later, I wouldn't even know what to say.
Yeah, and look, you sort of made that point for me. That's sort of my big not takeaway, but my sort of opinion with this, because yes, obviously Terry Funk, and when anyone passed away, it's obviously sad, especially with the families and what have you. But Terry Funk, he was born in 1944. He's well and truly lived his life. He's like sucked all the juice he can out of it, so to speak. And now you're sort of just, like you're living now. He's unfortunately passed away. He's 78, 79, 80, that sort of thing. Bray Wyatt, Wyndham, 36. Like that's too young. Like that's confronting how young that is. Because I mean, you're what? You're Kevin mid-20s. Like he's not much older than you. You
Yeah.
know, like that's. And the thing with Wyndham is that with his career, which I mean we'll get to in the coming minutes and over the next like hour or so, with a guy like this, he came in, and really made an impact. What 2013? So Bray's what? In his mid-20s, which is rare because usually nowadays wrestlers come in their mid 30s, late 30s. That's just sort of what we're accustomed to. But Wyndham, I mean, when it was Husky Harris, that's 13 years ago. He's literally early 20s, early to mid 20s, which is pretty nuts. Then he does the Wyatt family stuff, and he's literally mid 20s, and he's fleshed out a whole career for himself. He made himself one of the guys of this sort of era, this last 10 to 15 years. Bray's one of the main guys in this period of time. World championship runs, memorable programs, memorable characters, a gimmick and a persona you can identify really easily, and different parts to that as well unpack. So yeah, look, I mean, we'll continue to unpack this throughout the next hour, Kevin. But I guess one thing I'll ask you now is, I mean, how did you find out? Like, I mean, this happened yesterday. Everyone's got a different sort of finding out with this. For a lot of people, it was, they saw Triple H's tweet. Like, he was the first one who really kind of broke it because he got the sort of messaging through from Wyndham's father. But for you, like, how'd you find out?
So I was at my friend's house, sitting on the couch, and I get a notification on my phone. I'm like, oh, it's ESPN or Bleacher Report, whoever it was, and it just said WWE star Bray Wyatt is dead at 36. And I just looked at my phone and I just said, Bray Wyatt's dead. Like, I just said that out loud, And then, like, my friends were sending me this on Instagram, like, is this real? Is this real? This isn't part of the show, right? This isn't fake. And I was like, no, like it's not real. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that to be funny. Like, my friends are just ignorant to wrestling. They don't really know wrestling like I do, So, they just don't know. And, like, every mainstream media outlet was picking this up. Everybody was posting this. Any news site. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like, Bray Wyatt is one of the modern day stars of this era. Like I said, when I think of the PG era, when I think of the 2010s decade, I think of Roman Reigns, I think of The Shield, of course, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, I think of AJ Styles, you think of John Cena, Brock Lesnar, and then the Wyatt family's right there in that conversation in terms of synonymous stars with this era. Wow, yeah, it was sad just seeing that, and I couldn't really believe it. But how did you find out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that same thing. You don't believe it. That's my sort of process with it. It's just this like sort of stunned shock. Like, what? Like, no? Like, you kidding? Obviously, some people, understandably so, like, get really emotional. So, like, crying right away. Some people just like, inconsolable when horrible news like this comes about. For me, I'm sitting at work. It's it's about 12 o'clock. I'm on my lunch break. I get my phone out to like just go on YouTube and eat my lunch, fill in the next like 20, 25 minutes. The first thing on my YouTube sort of page was the All Elite Wrestling, the AEW like tribute little post they did, which was, the All Elite Wrestling, the AEW family, and the wrestling world wishes to acknowledge whatever they said about, the passing of Windham Rotunda. And then they had the graphic of Bray Wyatt. And I was just like, I was like, what? Huh? No, like this isn't right. Like, what? And my initial reaction was that he took his own life. That was my initial thing of like, oh no. Like I was, oh no, because like I thought to myself right away, there was the Brody Lee, John Huber thing 2.5 years ago. Is this similar to like the Eddie and Benoit thing where like that was just so big of a loss for him that he just couldn't go on without him? So that was my first like initial, and we got to find out that it was COVID related. There was like a heart issue, and then that unfortunately was what happened. But it's just, the initial reaction is obviously, as is the case with everyone, just like stunned shock, like, no, this can't be real. Like, what the hell, So I mean, that's how I found out, Kevin. I mean, anything on that, or where do you want to go from that? Like,
nah, I mean, there's not really too much more we can add to that. It's just news that you hate to see, that you wish you didn't have to read. I mean, think about it. Bray Wyatt's 36. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, like, a lot of these guys, they're all in the same age, Pretty much all of them, and it's a different time in wrestling. This is not the era in wrestling where wrestlers are dying at this age.
Mm.
It doesn't happen with these guys. You know, AJ Styles is almost 50, still wrestling better than he ever has. You know, it's just, it's so rare. It's not like in the 80s and 90s where, you know, those guys, once like the late 90s, early 2000s hit, all the drugs and the steroids and everything was wearing on them, you know, and they were dropping like flies at a young age. You know, it's a different time, it's a different business, and it's sad to see Bray Wyatt go so early. But let's try to get this into a positive direction.
Yeah.
Let's take more of a tribute route. Let's talk about all things Bray Wyatt. So first off, what was your favorite version of Bray Wyatt? He's had many iterations. You know, there was
Oh yeah.
Husky Harris, you know, the Wyatt family, the Eater of Worlds, the Fiend, Funhouse Bray. So many different iterations of the guy. But what was your favorite?
Oh, that's such a, because I haven't thought about that honestly, like really ever until now. And like, because as you list there, there's so many different versions of this guy, you know. And one thing with wrestling generally, a lot of stars maybe only have maybe one version or maybe two versions of themselves, right? Like they have, you know, maybe one run as one character, and then maybe they turn heel for a little bit, and then they come back as the one character they were. But with Bray, with Wyndham, there's like a laundry list of different things he's done, and a lot of them he's done quite well, or that have had profound, like I guess, impact on wrestling and profound significance. I mean, Husky Harris is, we're not really counting. That was just sort of like he's like a role player. He's just sort of one of those Nexus guys. We'll get your Husky Harris thoughts in a few minutes here, Kevin. But really, to me, I'm gonna personally go with that like first White family stint was my favorite. Like I know for me, it's 2013. I'm 10 at that point. I'm watching those vignettes that were airing on Raw. They started them about May. I remember I had like my little iPad. I was watching on the WWE app at the time because that was like the big thing. The app, like they have all the little clips, and like I'd be fascinated by it. It was Bray Wyatt, it was the Shield, it was the White family. To me, those are the most interesting wrestlers because by that point, CM Punk had sort of started to like be a bit kind of tail off a little bit. Like he'd done his WrestleMania 29 thing, he'd taken his hiatus. I'm like the Shield, the Wyatt family. I remember I was writing down like the Shield's all their wins because they had like a win streak, and I had write down who they beat. I had like the Wyatt family and like what they were doing. I was looking at NXT stuff, and you got a guy like Bray Wyatt doing these vignettes. It stood out so much because Kevin, especially in 2013, everything was in front of you. Everything was in the ring. Everything was between the ropes. And then you got the Wyatt family. Then you got Wyndham. You got, you know, Luke Harper. You got Eric Rowan. They're off in some rinky-dink compound in the middle of some wood somewhere. The sheep mask thing was flashing on screen. Bray was in his rocking chair. He was talking all different. Luke Harper, and there's these three just giant creepy dudes. It stood out so much. Like I connected with that. Like I was like, oh my god, who are these guys? Like a 10-year-old me was like really invested by them. They did a phenomenal job at what they were trying to do. So to me, it'll be the Wyatt family, and I'll speak more about them in a minute. But I guess for you, same question. What iteration of Bray kind of struck a chord with you most?
I was thinking about this. I really enjoyed the Fiend. That's kind of like what I like in wrestling is the entertainment aspect. I like the novelty act that it was. You know, it was the mystery, the mystique. It was different. You know, it was really truly different. I know a lot of people didn't really like it. Um, you know, but in terms of character work, the Fiend was, I think, the best character work he ever did. It was so out of the box. You know, just out of the ordinary. It was completely unlike anything that we've seen in WWE throughout the PG era. You know, nothing really about the Fiend was PG. I mean, he made it work, you know. And then the stuff that he would do with the Funhouse spray, it was fun. I really like that iteration.
Yeah, I mean, the Fiend, and we'll get to the Fiend a bit more later. But I mean, that would have worked in any era. That's one thing. Which with these Bray characters, like that Wyatt family bit, and definitely the Fiend and the Funhouse thing, that works in literally any era. Like you put that in the mid '90s, that works. You put that in the Attitude Era, some iteration of that works. You put that in the Ruthless Aggression era, that, they make that work somehow. And it worked under PG, which is probably the hardest one to make it work in, because the Fiend, and as you say, it's not like a PG thing. It's this sick like demon from hell, basically. This really creepy mask, this possessed like persona, and Bray made it work. Of course he did. And there are parts of it, especially with like the fun house and some of the storytelling with that, where it was a bit cryptic. It was a bit like sort of what's going on. That was all part of, I guess, the act. And I guess one Bray I want to shout out. I mean, this is sort of on the Wyatt family thing, but for me, some of my fondest memories of Bray were 2014. Bray had a phenomenal 24. He had a big 2014 in terms of, I guess, who he was feuding with, his position on the show. So you're starting the year. He has the match with Daniel Bryan. They had that big thing 2 weeks into the year with the steel cage. Daniel Bryan's in the Wyatt family, and then he breaks out, and Bray's in that main event of Raw against Daniel Bryan in the steel cage. Bryan's doing the yes chant. Like, Bray was there. The Wyatt family was a part of that. It felt like they were teasing some sort of, I mean, they could do Bray versus Cena. They could do Bray versus Brock. Like, where they were going with Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family. Kevin, they do the Shield matches, which we'll touch on a bit later on, as how big they were. And then Bray's feuding with Cena. And for me, like, my fondest memory of, I guess, the Wyatt family Eater of Worlds version was the build up to Extreme Rules. You've got the Wyatt family, Bray Wyatt. They had a bunch of the people with the sheep masks on. I don't know if you remember this, but they've got all the kids around ringside, all the people singing, he's got the whole world in his hands, which I thought as an 11-year-old, that was like the most nuts thing I've ever seen. Like, Bray's conducting this creepy choir of children singing, he's got the whole C Nation in his hands, he's got the whole world in his hand, the whole crowd singing. And like, it's a dynamic that like we hardly saw in the last 15 years. It was a connection with the audience and the fan. I know for me as the 11-year-old, I was just like struck by it. So, I can speak to that. Kevin, I guess we're moving on now for you. I mean, what were your first impressions of Bray? I sort of gave mine there, but what were for you? Because we mentioned Husky Harris and that sort of thing. I'll pass this to you. What were your first impressions of Windham?
Yeah, the first time I ever saw Windham Rotunda was as a member of the Nexus. That was it. That was my first introduction to good old Windham Rotunda as Husky Harris. I literally witnessed his entire career, his on-screen television career with WWE from day one. I don't remember too much, like, initially. I kind of saw the guy, and he was like a background guy in the Nexus. He wasn't really anything of prominence. That whole Nexus thing was built around Cena and the Invasion. And then later the NXT pros, and that really became about Miz and Daniel Bryan. There wasn't too much there. I was just like, oh, okay, this guy, like, he's here. Yeah, Husky Harris, like, it was kind of an awkward position. Not a position of prominence, per se. Nothing really that stood out. It's kind of like Dolph Ziggler in the Spirit Squad. It's kind of like that, to a degree. It's just like this guy that's thrown into a random multi-man faction.
Yeah. And
then he completely changes his identity, and it's like you forget that ever existed, because he became so good as a solo star. So then really my first impressions of Bray Wyatt, I remember this, watching Raw in like the summer of 2013, when they started running those Wyatt family compound vignettes. And I was like, oh, that's cool. This is different. This is unique. Like, this has a unique feel to it. And that's that's going to be the running theme here when talking about Bray Wyatt is unique. Everything about the Wyatt family and those vignettes and their debut and the Inferno match with Kane at SummerSlam, everything about Bray Wyatt, it has been and always was unique. And I was just blown away with what I saw with the Wyatt family. I was like, wow, that is cool. I don't know who that guy is. I didn't remember that he was Husky Harris when I first saw Bray Wyatt in 2013, but I was like, oh yeah, okay, I don't know who that guy is, but man, he looks cool. I want to see what he's into. And it was really cool, and it was really hot for like the first year or so. And then, things kind of settled by the wayside after a Cena feud, but we'll get into that later on.
Yeah. No, 100%. I'll just pass on, carry on what you're saying there. Like, I mean, Bray got his foot in the door. So Bray Windham got his foot in the door as a role player. He got a position. It was in this case this Nexus sort of new Nexus sort of thing. Whatever. He was on SmackDown. He's getting Cena punched him in a hotel room. Like it's sort of just whatever. But he's got like his foot in the door. That was his entry. Like you don't always start. I mean, this is the case in most lines of work or most things generally. You don't put your foot in the door and you're all of a sudden like the main event superstar carrying the company. Like this was Wyndham's entry. He was wearing the wearing the Nexus, like little tank top, and he was getting punched and beat up by whatever babyface, or he's being yelled at by Wade Barrett, like stuff like that. That was his entrance, and then further that Wyatt family thing. One thing I'll speak to, growing up at the time, having friends who are also watching at the time, really that sort of 2013 thing, to build on what you're saying there, the Wyatt family and the Shield are the most interesting things by far, especially in like for the majority of 2013, because Cena's Cena, Punk's Punk, Bryan's gaining traction, he's building, but it's the Wyatt family and the Shield. They were the most interesting from a kids and like growing up standpoint. They were the ones who captured your attention. I imagine you, who are a bit older, were probably similar. I mean, you're probably watching the show at the time thinking, okay, Cena's whatever. He's been in Top Guy for like 9 years. This Wyatt family thing with, Bray, like the mask and the rocking chair and the lantern and these big, huge 6'8" dudes with beards they're wearing like overalls. And then you got the Shield, who are these just like badasses who are all wearing like gear. Like that is the next. That is the now. So I don't know. I mean, that was my experience. Those are my first impressions. Kevin, I guess I'll carry it on to you here. I guess thoughts with WrestleMania 30. This is like a big thing with Bray Wyatt. A lot of people have opinions on this. Some adamant he was buried. Some people like it was a great moment for him. He got to wrestle Cena at WrestleMania. Others are just like it sort of happened. For you, Kevin, what were your thoughts on 2014 Bray Wyatt, the Cena feud particularly, and whether WrestleMania 30 buried him?
I think WrestleMania 30 was his peak. I think that's the word I would use. That was his absolute peak in WWE. It's kind of unfortunate that the character peaked out like 7 months in, but it was going to be kind of hard to recapture that magic, that same magic with the whole world in his hands and the choir and the crowd being super in love with him. When you catch that magic so early, it's not the same as when you build up to it, and then you get that magic. Like what happened with like Stone Cold or Daniel Bryan or Shawn Michaels. These guys that paid their dues. Bray Wyatt shows up in July, as the character Bray Wyatt shows up in like July 2013, and by April 2014, he's the biggest thing going. So it's really tough to come back from that. And he managed to become an upper mid-card guy the rest of his career. And it's not a slight to him that he was an upper mid-card guy. I mean, he made a ton of money, had a great career, and that's realistically what he was. He flatlined out after that WrestleMania 30 storyline with John Cena. And I don't think the result of the match, like if Vince McMahon would have said, all right, I'm going to write Bray Wyatt's name on the winner's side, I don't think that really would have changed the trajectory all that much of Wyatt's career. I don't know. I don't think it would have made too much of a difference. Like, he would have beat Cena. And then what would he do after that? So, I don't know. Buried is not the right word.
Yeah.
He ended up becoming still one of the biggest stars of the decade. So he wasn't buried. That's for sure. So I don't know. That's the way I've always seen that whole situation.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. I guess for me, watching at the time, I can only speak to, at the time what I was feeling watching it, like going in, that whole storyline with Bray was going to like try and break and like bring down Cena's legacy and like change Cena. Like that wasn't really the first time that sort of thing had been done, but the way Bray was doing it was unique. As we discussed, it's unique. It stands out. And that video package, with the Eminem song for WrestleMania 30, where Cena's looking in the mirror and then he puts water on, he splashes his face with water and like the sheep mask is there, and then he turns around and it's not there. And like you got Bray Wyatt with those cryptic like promos. I'm gonna break you, John. I'm gonna bend your legacy, John. Like I don't know. It was like a magic in a bottle almost.
Yes.
Was the match the greatest? Not really. Like, I mean, Wyatt and Cena wasn't like the greatest match in the ring, but everything that encompassed it was really good. If Bray Wyatt won, I think that would have changed the trajectory of his career quite a bit. I guess to me, how I view that match and like that outcome, it was sort of the start of what would become with Bray for the next really few years until he became, I mean, the Fiend, in my opinion, where he talked the big game. There'd be the big song and dance, the cryptic promos, usually a generally pretty good storyline, an interesting build, and all the semantics surrounding it. But he'd just lose. Like he was, always the upper mid card, as you say. He was, credible in that regard. But he wouldn't win those big matches. And you look at WrestleMania 30, that was sort of the start of that. He did everything perhaps perfectly, bar win that match. And I get it. Do you want to have Cena, your face of the era, lose at WrestleMania 30? I get it. I understand that. But, from the perspective of Bray Wyatt in his career, yeah, it didn't bury him. I'm not saying, of course it didn't bury him. Like, he's one of the stars of this era. But would it have put him maybe an echelon above if Cena gets knocked off at WrestleMania 30 by this upcoming guy, Bray Wyatt? I mean, it would have been a big deal because this is the same Cena who hardly ever lost. Like, this is before Brock Lesnar squashed him at SummerSlam. This is still Super Cena. This is the unbreakable Cena that infamous picture of Cena having his comeback where he's like shirtless and he flexes the muscle like this. Like that. That's the Cena who just would lift Big Show and Edge on his shoulders, would never lose, only lost to CM Punk in Chicago with a bunch of people threatening riots. Like, that was that Cena. So, I don't know. To me, yeah, it wasn't a burial. No, it was not. Would it have been significant if Bray Wyatt ended that match, with the Wyatt family huddled over Cena's like lifeless body and saying like, "We broke you, John." Like casual fans would have been like, "Oh my god, who like this guy's he's there to stay." So yeah, I mean, comes and goes. It's not like the biggest end of the world thing as we've discussed, but would have been big. It would have been big.
So, what's your favorite Bray Wyatt match?
Oh, also 2014, Shield Wyatt's Elimination Chamber. It's hard to go past that.
Yeah.
I know some people. We can discuss Wyatt singles matches in a minute and everything with that, but as far as a match Wyatt was involved in, that match against the Shield, I mean, I could go on for a while. I'm going to pass this to you. Shield Wyatt family. Did you see that match live? What did you think of the feud, that match? Talk to us.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course, yeah. Saw that live. I was watching every week at that point. Yeah, for me it was the Raw match that they had. I don't remember what time frame that was, but that Raw match was special, man. That's one of the best TV matches in the history of Raw. That Shield Wyatt match.
I think that was. Someone's going to fact check this, but I'm talking about that was the Raw in Chicago. I think that was the Hijack Raw.
I think so.
March 3rd.
Yeah, it might have been.
I think what happened was that obviously everyone knew going in, like the whole building is going to be just chanting for Punk the whole show, and WWE were like, "Nah, we're not having this. Heyman's coming out to open. We're doing Shield Wyatts. We're doing a tag title." Like, they went all out. I think that match was one of them. Like, that match for 20 minutes, the crowd were like, "Oh, we're hooked by this." Phil Brooks can go sit and cry on his couch bitching. We care about this match right now. Bray Wyatt, the Shield, the Wyatt family. That's what we're here for. So yeah, carry on.
That's hilarious. I love that. I love that Phil Brooks line. No, that match, absolutely spectacular. That's probably my favorite match that I ever saw Bray Wyatt involved with. Favorite singles match, probably Royal Rumble 2014 with Daniel Bryan. I can't think off the top of my head of too many like really great like in-ring singles matches from Bray Wyatt. I really dug the match at WrestleMania 36 with Cena, even though that was more of a segment. But that was so fun. That was so creative, so cool. One of the most unique things you'll ever see on WWE TV. That was awesome. Where you got Cena going through like his own legacy and going back to the time with Hogan and Stone Cold and being part of the NWO. Like, that was so cool. That whole storyline with him and Cena, that was so awesome. And you could tell Bray Wyatt's mind was heavily involved in that.
No, I will say, and on that, I can't agree with you more about how brilliant that Funhouse thing was with Cena WrestleMania 36. I understand, like, I get the side of it where, you do that at WrestleMania 36, you do that in 2020, and you sort of park that and move on with, the world's opened up for 2021, and you don't really keep going back to the well for those cinematic things. But especially WrestleMania 37, when Wyatt's feuding with Randy Orton and there's the Alexa Bliss thing, that match should have been the Funhouse match with Cena, but with Randy Orton. That would have been so much better. Instead, I mean, you were there for this. There's black gunk. There's a box. It's just, it was Wyatt's mind turned up a bit too far. But if you look at, they do a Funhouse match for that. Imagine what they could have done in a Randy Orton Firefly Funhouse. Imagine the scandal. Imagine, they got Randy Orton pooping in a bag.
Oh my god.
They go through all of it, Kevin. But no, further to that, I think singles match is hard to go by. That 2014 Rumble match. I mean, that was the best match on that event by far. Like the 2014 Rumble was like
no. You're missing. Oh no, that was 15. Never mind. The Cena Lesnar Rollins triple threat, that was 15.
No. 2014 was quite literally. I mean, Batista
Big
won the
Show,
Rumble.
Brock. Yeah.
Rey Mysterio got booed. And then the other match was Cena versus Orton for about the 300th time. This was the world title. The crowd is chanting, "We want Sheamus, JBL, Randy Savage. We want refunds." Yeah. So, Bray Wyatt and Daniel Bryan opening that show, that stole the whole event. Many would say Bryan should have appeared at the end of the show and won the Rumble. That's 9 years ago, whatever. But the point being, Bray Wyatt and that match, that was the absolute best one-on-one in the ring we got. I think star ratings from memory, seeing reviews, people giving that 4.25 sort of thing. I was getting above 4 stars consistently. I don't think anyone's giving that 5s, but that was a universally accepted, really quality Bray Wyatt match. And then other ones people will suggest, I mean, some like the stuff with Balor, some like those matches. Personally, this is a bit obscure. I know some people hated this, Kevin. I like the stuff with Dean Ambrose. I know most people aren't going to mention this. You won't hear this one much in the Bray Wyatt, legacy tributes. But to me, that Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose feud, it started a bit dumb with the hologram of whatever at Hell in a Cell 2014. A monitor exploded at TLC or something, and the ending was a bit dumb. But the match they got out with Wyatt and Ambrose, I personally liked as well.
That match got 4 stars. That Bryan and Wyatt match. 4 stars from old Uncle Dave.
Yeah.
Crazy. Wow. Yeah. I mean, he's had so many just incredible moments. Another match too that jumps to mind is that Hell in a Cell match with Roman Reigns. I thought that match was damn good. One of the better blood red Hell in a Cell matches. At least that jumped to mind. That was cool. I thought that was just 2 guys beating the hell out of each other. I thought they had insane chemistry. Roman and Bray. I think in ring, Roman was probably Bray's best opponent that he had a good prolonged storyline with. They worked really well together for whatever reason. So I want to say this. Good.
100%. I was just going to say one thing just quickly on that. I mean, this is no doubt making the rounds on Twitter, and it always does. But that spot, I mean, with Bray and Roman, where I think they're in a tag team together. It was a Raw match, and Bray hits a move, and he's got someone in a cover, and then the camera's angled facing Bray. Bray just points, and Roman hits this sick spear. It was just it was a timing thing with those two. Those two just sort of clicked. But yeah, as you say, carry on.
Yeah, no. So I want to talk about his 2016-17 time. So he was one of the pinnacles of SmackDown, of that great 2016-2017 era of SmackDown post the draft in the fall. And he's really renowned for his role. I mean, we saw the stuff with Randy Orton that they feuded I don't even know how long at that time, when Randy Orton burned down Sister Abigail. And then they had the match at WrestleMania 33. Of course, Wyatt wins the WWE title at Elimination Chamber from Cena. Really just a lot of cool stuff. Maybe maybe a second peak for Bray Wyatt, or a second run on top. It was one of those things where you're looking at Bray Wyatt, you're like, okay, this guy kind of hard to take him serious at this point. Like you said, he talked a big game and then he'd lose. Then he gained all that credibility back right away. And he was a credible champion walking into WrestleMania. And the thing with him is that he was more so like a transitional champion.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and with all due respect, you know, because that's a big deal. You know, being good enough to be a champion, regardless, period, is a big deal. Bray Wyatt, I don't think Vince McMahon or WWE or you know the masses that be saw Bray Wyatt as a guy that could carry the championship. You know, I don't know if Bray Wyatt is the ideal WWE champion. You know, when you think of a guy that you want on Good Morning America, like you think of like a guy like Cody or Randy Orton, you know, Triple H, guys like that. Bray Wyatt didn't really fit that mold, but when he was in that main event scene, especially 2016-17, it was special.
No, 100%. And because, yeah, by that point, I mean, I like you touched on that, but yeah, by that point, we've seen the Cena thing where you talk the big game, and it's a big sort of build, and then, I mean, Bray loses the feud in the end, but he, puts up a good showing. There's the Dean Ambrose feud, late 2014, as I touch on. Pretty good feud. Bray, there's this thing with the monitor, a bit messy, but yeah, he feuds with Ambrose, has the Undertaker match and feud at WrestleMania 31. He faced the Undertaker the year after the streak broke, which is a big deal. If that match was, under dark, but because of the time zones, it was in daylight, so it was a little odd. But Bray Wyatt faced the Undertaker at WrestleMania, and he talked the big game in the build-up and fell short. Then the feud with Roman Reigns, a lot of build there, a lot of hype there, some good matches, some good chemistry there. Fell short again. And then 2016, Wyatt family gets beaten up by The Rock and Cena at WrestleMania. I guess they were going to do the Wyatts versus Brock or Bray versus Brock. That never mounted to be. I mean, Bray versus Brock would have been better than whatever that Ambrose thing was with Brock Lesnar. But nonetheless, Kevin, and yeah, we got to SmackDown 2016-17. And to me, I've gone back to watch a bunch. I didn't watch that live at the time. That was right as I tuned off because of how bad Raw was. I couldn't watch Raw, and I just stopped watching SmackDown entirely because of how bad Raw was. I was like, I can't do this Kevin Owens, Finn Balor thing. Balor's been here 2 minutes. He's a champion. I can't do this no more. I just turned off. But when I go back and watch SmackDown in this era, to me, Styles was like the star, and then it was Bray Wyatt. And beneath them, obviously, you had Ambrose, Cena, Orton, James Ellsworth, and Luke Harper. And there was a bunch of pieces around that. But to me, and how I interpreted that, and Miz and Ziggler and those guys, but it was, Styles and Bray were like the main event pieces. And as obviously those guys beneath them helped made the show as good as it was. So, it was a great performance from Bray over a number of months, closing out 2016, coming to 2017, the Elimination Chamber, he wins the championships. This emotional moment, the pictures of Bray Wyatt backstage with the title, some of the great pictures. I know, shout out Brian, that's his new profile picture, like that picture of Bray Wyatt backstage with the title. And then in the lead up to WrestleMania 33, Kevin, question for you. You were there for WrestleMania 33. I mean, like, what was that like? Because, like, I'd imagine that would be a bit sort of odd. I mean, Bray Wyatt's wrestling Randy Orton. It's the WWE Championship match. And, I mean, talk to us about that experience. What was that like?
So I'll be honest when I discuss this. I'll avoid being super negative, but I'll be honest. I did not really care for that match. Sitting there live, it was an 8-hour show in Orlando, Florida, in the 95-degree weather. So by the time Orton and Wyatt are out there, it's probably like 10:30 at night, I'd say, roughly, give or take, around that time. We still had yet to see Brock versus Goldberg. No, it was probably more like 11. It was probably more like 11, because I think Roman and Undertaker started like right before midnight. So it was like 10:45, 11. We're watching this match. And I'm just sitting there like, man, oof.
Yeah.
The maggots thing, really just a shame that Bray Wyatt's one moment in the sun at WrestleMania in a world title feud and the world title picture with a guy like Randy Orton was made out to be like that. I don't know who created that or whose idea it was, but you had this great storyline. And you had this really hot storyline that people were invested in this fantastic era of SmackDown where, AJ was doing fun stuff as a champion. Ambrose was doing cool stuff. The women were doing good stuff.
Miz and Ziggler.
Yeah, Miz and Ziggler. And then you had Orton and Wyatt just being another piece to that puzzle. So, and then we get to WrestleMania and they have this match that really underwhelmed. It really underwhelmed in every sense of the word. And kind of like the match a few years later at WrestleMania 37, just kind of underwhelmed after a pretty good feud and pretty good build up. Um, it was just, it was a thing with Bray Wyatt where he was not the best in ring wrestler, and he had a lot of weaknesses in that standpoint. And I think it would have been tough. And this is why he wasn't really a guy that could be the face of the company. It would have been tough for him to go in there and have a 20-minute match with Randy Orton, I think they could have found other ways. They could have done like a street fight or something and had those two beat the hell out of each other for 11 minutes. But then you had Brock and Goldberg having a car crash right after. So, if Vince tells Brock, hey, these guys are gonna have a street fight, and then you and Goldberg gonna do your thing, Brock probably would be like, oh well, I'm not cool with that. So there's a lot of politics that go into stuff like this, and it's just unfortunate that that was his one moment in the sun as world champion at WrestleMania, literally in the sun.
Literally in the sun. Yeah, no, that would have been fun. 8 hours in the baking hot sun, pal. But no, I mean, it was a bit of a rock and a hard place situation. Like, they're probably going to this match going, we have like 15 minutes to do this match. You've got like Brock and Goldberg right after us. There's already been like a Hardy Boys Fatal 4-Way ladder match before. So, I think we can't really do much of a straight fight thing, but like a singles one-on-one without any sort of extra stuff, extra cinematic stuff is probably going to kill the crowd. So, like, what do we do? So I get it. And yeah, that's just, that would be probably the main glaring weakness of Bray Wyatt. It was just the in-ring. And that was something that was called out at length by, your wrestling observers and those sort of publications and portions of the wrestling community, the wrestling media, who these same people gave Bray Wyatt the Wrestling Observer Worst Match of the Year award 4 times, which is pretty nuts. And yeah, because obviously he wasn't in the ring. He's not Bryan Danielson. He brings a different sort of element to the table. And yeah, WrestleMania 33, his one moment in the baking hot sun, pal. Maggots are on the ring. You've got worms. The referee, it was... I hated this, to be like that match. And once again, obviously we're honoring Bray. Bray himself, I have no doubt, in a closed room, if I'm just talking to Windham, he'd be like, yeah, that wasn't it. I've done some really fun, cool, creative, interesting, great things in my career. That didn't click. That didn't hit. And you've got, the camera shot, the really stage-looking camera shot from above the ring. And the referee's he looks up at the camera, then he gets out of the ring, he slides out of the ring. And then they got Randy Orton's like, whoa, there are maggots, and Wyndham's like, worms. It's just, which producer approved that? But nonetheless, Kevin, one other thing in that feud before we move on, the House of Horrors and everything, after WrestleMania, the feud continued. Randy Orton burned down the compound, John, and there was more sort of storytelling with that. You were watching at the time, I guess, how was that? Because obviously we have WrestleMania, the referee's sliding out. Oh my God, there are maggots. Let me get out of the ring. They're projecting maggots on there. There's that. You're in the baking hot sun, whatever. Moving on the next month, 2 months for the last part of the feud. Randy Orton's invading the compound. They do a match at the Wyatt family compound. It gets burned down. Talk to us about that, Kevin. What were your ruthless opinions on the compound, pal?
I don't remember too much about that. I wasn't I guess clued in at that point. I was kind of done with the Orton Wyatt storyline after the maggots incident. So I don't remember too much about the House of Horrors. I just remember thinking it was kind of faux, a little over the top.
Yeah.
Kind of 80s wrestling, which is cool. I just wasn't too into it at the time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this for a moment. Let's talk about The Fiend.
Yep.
I think we spent enough time on 2016-17.
Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah, so let's talk about The Fiend. Now, what do you think about The Fiend overall? Would you say, in the grand scheme of things, The Fiend was a success?
This is the thing, and especially now, a lot of people now are going to say it was just a clear success. And, I'll probably lean towards it being as more of a success than a failure. I think the term failure is a bit harsh because, it made a lot of money. The Fiend merchandise sold like crazy, masks, shirts, gear. The gimmick worked from a business point of view. It did. It was the most compelling thing in WWE programming from the moment it debuted at SummerSlam 2019, which that was an incredible moment. SummerSlam, that debut of the Fiend was by far the moment of SummerSlam. If that didn't happen, SummerSlam 2019 would have been utter bottom feeding trash. But nonetheless, for about what are we saying here, Kevin? Like mostly 8 months. Everything involving that character was the most interesting thing or one of on the show in just WWE generally. Like that was what you were talking about. This is at the time I'm watching this in 2019. This is the Universal Championship is literally Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman being a tag team who are good guys, and then they're having a match later in the night, pal. Like this isn't a great time for wrestling. And the Fiend comes in, and it's like, what it's the same thing as like 2013. You go, what the hell? What is this? Like there's this creepy, sick like mask. It's got the big blue like hole in the mouth. There's like a lantern, and then like the lights come on, and this possessed looking mask. And Fergal Devitt wearing the white gear at SummerSlam quite literally like shut himself basically. That was like that SummerSlam thing is the funniest thing. When Balor first realizes and like lights come on and he sees the Fiend, Fergal's acting is the best thing Fergal's done in his career. He's like,
wow.
Like that, you know.
Good old
like,
Fergie.
Fergie, yes, pal. If you're going back and watching Bray Wyatt stuff in the next day or 2 weeks, that Fiend debut match is, one of my favorites of Balor. That might be my favorite Balor matches favorite Wyatt match, or one of them, from the perspective of just, one, the OMG factor, 2, how Balor sold for it. Balor was like, a whole match, he just couldn't believe what he was looking at. And then Kevin, infamously, we get 7 weeks later, once again, similar thing to what they did in 2013 and 2014 with Cena. They have this hot act, this thing that just clicks, it works, and WWE put it up a notch too far too soon. And all of a sudden, it's a Hell in a Cell match for the Universal Championship, a literal no-win situation. Rollins had just won the thing. The Fiend had just debuted. He couldn't lose. And then there was a DQ and a schmoz ending. And fans are chanting, we want refunds, booing, give us our money back. And I don't know, Kevin, I'll pass you in a moment, but to answer the question, the Fiend was a success, albeit through some absolute debacles. We saw some of the low moments of modern era booking because of the Fiend. We saw the Hell in a Cell calamity that Planet Productions called a masterpiece in his worst take ever. And we saw the infamous Goldberg Fiend fiasco deep in the guts of Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in front of the Prince Pal. Wow. Bill Goldberg looked Vincent Kennedy McMahon in the eyes and said, I'm not doing the job for that, brother. And then proceeded to smash the Fiend, stack the Fiend, pin the Fiend, dethrone the Fiend, pal. So there you go, Kevin. That's my opinion. Talk to us.
Wow. A lot was said there. So I want to address the Fiend overall. Me personally, I view the Fiend as a success. As I said, my favorite version of Bray Wyatt. I really liked it. The only problem, like we said, is that it had to get to the ring, and it was kind of tough once we got to the ring. But overall, everything the Fiend did was unique and interesting and topical. He was the talk of wrestling. One of, if not the main talk of wrestling, from when the Fiend character debuted up until he stepped away after WrestleMania 37. He was the talk of the company in a lot of aspects. There'd be Raw episodes in the end of 2020, the fall of 2020, where the biggest talking point, the biggest thing that happened would be Randy Orton holding Alexa Bliss in his arms, as she was the female Fiend. Because so many cool things came out of that. We could be here for hours talking about the cool stuff that happened in that era, in the pandemic era and whatnot. I do want to talk about the Goldberg thing for a moment. Yeah, the Goldberg thing just is horrendous. No matter how you spin it, it's really embarrassing in a lot of aspects. When you show someone that's never watched wrestling, but someone that's not in tune with what's going on in wrestling on a week-to-week basis or month-to-month basis, and you show them and you're like, oh, this is Goldberg, this guy from WCW. Let's be honest. people that have everyday knowledge of wrestling, not a lot of them know who Goldberg is. Goldberg is not on the level of like a Shawn Michaels or a Bret Hart or Macho Man, where everyone kind of knows those guys. Goldberg's like a notch below that with that star power. So you show someone, you're like, okay, this is Goldberg. Who the hell's Goldberg? Oh, he was in WCW on cover of TV guides, all this. Here he is. He's gonna beat the one of the biggest stars in the WWE. This unique Fiend character. He's gonna beat him in like 2-3 minutes, and it's just like why? Like one of the worst booking decisions that I can remember. Just so questionable. Didn't make any sense. I get it. You wanted to do Goldberg versus Roman Reigns with the championship. Yes, that is a championship worthy match. I get it. I understand. I'm all here for it. Why put the championship on Bray Wyatt in the beginning if you don't think he's a guy that can hold it till WrestleMania? If you don't think he's worthy to face Roman Reigns, and he's a worthy heel for Roman Reigns to conquer, why put the championship on him to begin with?
Yeah, and with that, one thing just becomes clear when you unpack it that way, to me at least. Obviously, the situational awareness in those instances, the Goldberg thing, having him come back, and within 7 weeks, he's facing Seth Rollins inside Hell in a Cell for the title. Even that Cena WrestleMania thing and having him lose, like it's stuff like that, which it's like you're better off just not having done that at all. Like with the Fiend, for instance, in hindsight, Kevin, because obviously hindsight's 2020. It's easy to say this years in advance once the dust has settled. The Fiend should have made it clear, and you can easily do this with a character like the Fiend. The Fiend isn't here for a belt. The Fiend isn't here to, win a prop manufactured by Kevin Dunn and Johnny Ace in some warehouse. That's not what the Fiend's there for. The Fiend's to avenge the death of Sister Abigail 5 years ago and put carnage in his wake. Like the Fiend's just there to release his inner monster. He doesn't care. The Fiend doesn't care about winning a title. That's not what the Fiend's there for. That would have saved the Hell in a Cell debacle. It would have saved the Goldberg debacle. Maybe it would have had 2-3 years of longevity. You never know. But instead, once you get to, the big stage championship matches, there's style clashes. You got Goldberg challenging for a title against a guy who, one, stylistically, there's no click there. Two, it's never going to work. Then like Goldberg and, then you got like Roman comes back. Roman's always been in the title match, but the Fiend's like it becomes murky once you throw the title in like the main event echelon. Like to me, Bray should have been the guy who he's always obviously upper mid card as the Fiend, having big matches with like a Fiend story, but not the title doesn't need to be a part of it. It just doesn't. So I don't know. To me, the Fiend was a success to answer the question and to get this ball still moving. But yeah, just some of the execution as we discussed. It left a lot to be desired.
Absolutely. I'll touch on this so we can stay positive. Let's talk about that Randy Orton feud just for a minute. That Randy Orton feud that occurred in the pandemic. I thought it was so good. Honestly, everything those two guys did.
Yeah.
Like you got the fireball. Randy Orton setting him on fire. I mean, there was so much fun stuff, so much quirky, cool stuff. We really saw a different side of Randy Orton that we never saw. Like this was Randy Orton like doing character stuff. Before Randy Orton would come out and say, "Oh, I'm gonna punch you, John." Oh, now you got Randy Orton actually like trying, if you will. So much fun stuff. What did you think of like the pairing with him and Alexa Bliss and that whole era?
Had its moments for sure. I remember watching at that time. Like that was, because we're talking like back couple months of 2020, first few months of 2021. You got to think about where wrestling's at. That's like Roman Reigns when he's really starting to get momentum going. That's the first few months of the Tribal Chief thing. So that's on SmackDown. Raw, to be honest, like Drew McIntyre is like the guy on Raw, but by that point, Roman Reigns had already like ended his main event run basically by saying you'll never be the guy. And really, when you're watching a 3-hour Raw, you're looking forward to whatever thing they were going to do with the Fiend, Bray Wyatt, with Bliss, with Randy. It was the fireball. It was Randy Orton in the black gunk. There was the stuff with the doll, Alexa's playground with like the purple lighting in the empty arena. Randy Orton with the character work. Like the fireball thing, infamously. But Randy Orton was like blinded, and like there's so much to that. And I remember as from a content creator standpoint, that was phenomenal. At the end of 20, that gave us and like the viewers generally so much to be intrigued about, which was one of the great things of Bray. Now, how the feud ended at WrestleMania, yeah, I get it. Leaves once again a bit to be desired. I mean, you were there for this. There was a box, Kevin. There was black gunk. There was a tiara. There was like spraying goo everywhere. It was weird. And Bray Wyatt just lost after one RKO, and it was all a bit like 7 months for that. But the feud itself, the content of the build, I quite liked
Fun.
on the whole.
So much fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about his return in late 2022?
Yeah, so this I guess we're calling human Bray. Some say like Wyatt 6 Bray. They never really fleshed that out, like the Wyatt 6 thing, but yeah, human. I call it human Bray. Seeing Bray's like authentic side, especially that promo, Kevin. I know, obviously, you know the one I'm talking about. Everyone listening to this would know. After he came back at Extreme Rules, had the big shocking return. The SmackDown after, and really the couple of SmackDowns after that, seeing Bray's human side, the Wyndham's human side,
Awesome.
was incredible. Like, when you look back now, and obviously it's quite emotional, we have to do this. Like, you know, we don't have to, sorry, like, wording's all right. The fact that we're going back now in tribute of Bray and Wyndham and the whole career, the life of the person that was, when we look back at it, as far as I guess a promo, a moment, something that I guess is probably the most emotional moment of Wyndham's career was like that promo, where he's telling us, the fans, the WWE audience, the wrestling fraternity, like, you saved my life. You know, like, I've been through a lot of dark spots. You know, I've struggled with a lot of things. I've lost my best friend. I've, wondered my place in this world and all this. And then he says, like, just thank you for, believing in what I've created, for being me. Because the one thing you can never fault with Bray and Wyndham is that his career, especially from 2013 through 2023, that is him. That's not him going out to poorly read lines that Vince McMahon and some 64-year-old writer who's addicted to Starbucks wrote in WWE headquarters. That's not that. It's not Theory. It's not Mason Ryan. It's not a wrestler who's just following a script, boring. Bray Wyndham, he gave himself to his character, to his performance. And yeah, granted, like myself and basically everyone was critical at certain stages. Some were more critical throughout the whole journey. Some loved nearly everything. I was, a bit like, okay, this is a bit too far. This is a bit, I just, like everyone, had my gripes. But the one thing I can never fault Wyndham for is that he laid it all out there. And this promo, Kevin, the return of Wyatt, I mean, I'll pass your thoughts. I mean, what was it like for you seeing his human side?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the return. I was like, oh wow, Bray Wyatt's here. Like, that's cool. Like, he's back. Like, we still don't know why he left or what happened, but he's back, and yeah, here he is. It was a different, more humble, down to earth version of Bray Wyatt. I remember you and I, we kind of poked some fun at like the Mountain Dew Pitch Black match. That was around when we first started, relaunched this podcast.
Yeah.
And looking back at it, it's like, we're just having fun with some characters on a TV show.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the real person behind it. Nick Khan just wants to get some Mountain Dew revenue, ad revenue, sponsorship revenue. And he's like, all right, Bray, all right, LA Knight, you guys want to do this? They're like, yeah, sure. And they made chicken salad out of chicken shit. That they made it watchable. It was a good storyline. I wasn't too captivated by Bray and the return. Like, I thought the promos were good, and that's definitely was his strong suit by far, was promos and storytelling and creative writing. There were rumors, I believe, that he was involved in the creative team too during this run, which makes sense. I mean, he's one of the most brilliant minds. This is something we didn't really talk about.
Yeah.
He's a second generation guy. He got his foot in the door because his father is IRS, who was one of the characters from the 80s and 90s, that golden era. And he just got all of that just passed to him. Some guys, you look at like Nick Hogan and what's his daughter's name? Brooke Hogan. You look at them, God. And it's like, oh, these people don't have anything. Like, you're related to Hulk Hogan, and you got nothing, And then in this case, like, and with Randy Orton's case too, their fathers, Bob Orton and IRS, were, mid-card guys, undercard guys in the 80s, but then their children became Hall of Famers and became some of the best wrestlers we've ever seen. So it's just, kind of funny how that generational thing works. It's cool to think about. I just wanted to say that before I forgot. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't too captivated with the side of Bray. I do remember when he was scheduled to wrestle Bobby Lashley in like a cinnamon toast crunch match or whatever at WrestleMania, and then it didn't happen, and it was like, oh, Bray Wyatt pulled out, and we didn't know what happened. Like they were just like reporting like, oh, like mental health issues. Like nobody knew,
Hmm.
nobody knew what was going on, and then you come to find out, oh, this guy has a life threatening illness. Like, oh my god, you know,
Yeah.
like who knew? Who would have? Who knew? And I remember we were poking fun at that too on the podcast at the not at his illness, but at the match, the cinnamon toast crunch match. Like, oh, neither one of these guys wanted to do it. They just they faked injuries because they didn't want to do the match, and then it's like, man, then you find out what's really going on. It's like, wow, dude, and now here we are. It's crazy. It's just
Yeah, and
crazy.
I guess that's gonna that would be like what? Yeah, it just is the last sort of television stuff of Bray Wyatt was him and like that Wyatt Six thing that they didn't quite flesh out. That there was definitely a lot. I have no doubt if, and this is, I'll get to this in a minute, but if you like wrote that whole Wyatt Six idea and like what Wyndham was like his fundamental ideas for what that would have been or what he wanted that to look like, probably would have been masterful television. But it's one thing, it's like execution on the actual screen. But yeah, what we were poking fun at and what a lot of people were confused about was it was like, so Brock Lesnar is going to face Bobby Lashley for like the fourth time. Instead of a title, instead of whatever, the prize is facing Bray Wyatt. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I guess it was weird, because like I don't think that's how Wyndham wrote it up. I don't think Wyndham is sitting there backstage going, "Okay, we're going to tell this Wyatt Six story. We're going to tell bits of my past. We're going to maybe get Bo Dallas involved. We're going to get these characters. This guy's, we're going to get Joe Gacy involved from NXT. We're going to do this really sick thing. The audience is going to love it. My fans will love it. It'll put over X, Y, and Z people." He's probably crafted a year's worth of storytelling and storyline. And then whoever in creative, Vince McMahon or I don't even know who, some writer has gone, Bray, that sounds great, but what we're going to do is have Lashley face Brock again, and you're going to face the winner at WrestleMania. And we may do a cinnamon toast crunch match. Hold on that. We're going to see what Nick Khan, when he talks to the sponsors, if he can get 7 figures out of them instead of 6, we're going to do cinnamon toast. So watch this space. And Wyatt and Wyndham at this time, from what reports and all this, by that point, like this illness, the sickness sort of to come about, and none of that panned out, and who knows where it would have gone. But yeah, wow, then that's like the last of WWE and the last of Wyndham in wrestling generally was this thing where he's the prize and WWE must. It felt like they overruled his ideas. It felt like he wanted a Wyatt Six thing. He wanted some really good story with that, with maybe Lashley, and WWE were like, Lashley and Brock's going to fight the winner.
Yeah, and then you're gonna have cinnamon toast crunch, pal. Yeah. Bobby's gonna be in the locker room eating cinnamon toast crunch, and Bray Wyatt's just gonna show up out of nowhere, scare him. Like who knows what would have happened? But overall, I mean, what's Bray Wyatt's legacy?
Kevin, I'll answer this, and I have like my own sort of opinion here, which I've discussed in some videos before. And I'll pass to you, and then we can really close this out. But to me, he's that guy, and he's someone who his mind, I honestly think, was too great for WWE. Like he had a creative knack, like a nuance, like an understanding of storytelling, of character that honestly, for WWE between 2013 and 2023, it's like Bray's operating as like this like A++ mind in like a school sense, and WWE throughout that time are offering like D, F creative. Like he almost was a fish out of water in that regard, and he was so unique. What he provided, I mean, we discussed the Fiend, we discussed all these different things, the Wyatt family itself, all these different personas of Wyatt, all these things that, and many of them connected with the audiences. That was great. But I think, beneath it all was Wyndham, the person, wanting to express a character and express a version of him and express and do these stories that were just, they were too big. They were too nuanced for WWE. There were too many nuances, which, as I've discussed in videos I've made, I've discussed this on Elite Heat, you've chimed in on this as well. If you write down a Windham Rotunda like brainstorm, and you like, it's like a notebook, and it's like page after page of his ideas and what he wants to do with the character and all this. I have no doubt that's probably the best thing you've ever read. It would probably be like a masterpiece of like wrestling writing, just writing generally. But translating that, Kevin, to a WWE TV show with politics, with Goldberg not wanting to wrestle or match more than 5 minutes, with The Fiend, with Hell in a Cell in Sacramento, with we want to have the world title match 6 weeks after you come back, with all this stuff. It muddles up what was, in other words, like beautiful waters, I guess, if that makes sense. Like Windham Rotunda's creative mind is like a clear, beautiful stream, water's flowing, beautiful water. But then the politics, the, superstars not wanting to do the job, world title matches that shouldn't be happening, egos. That's like throwing sticks and jellyfish and a bit of food coloring and some dirt in the water. And what you're left with, Kevin, is 2023 and Bray Wyatt. It's murky. It's a bit confusing. It's hard to understand. There's some good stuff there, but there's a lot of confusion. There's a bit of like, what's going on? That's the best way I can describe it. That's the legacy of Bray Wyatt to me. It's a clear stream, a brilliant talent, a generational creative mind that gets murky, that gets muddled by the sort of, I guess we'll say the BS of wrestling, the reality of wrestling, all the stuff that goes into it. I think he would have been better in Hollywood. I just do. I think in a director role, in a creative producer role, he would have produced for the biggest movies of this millennium. If in a Hollywood directing role, his mind was unbelievable. So that's my stance, Kevin, on his legacy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I could have said it better myself. Honestly, I could see him doing horror movies. Some Netflix horror movies or big screen, big budget, big theater horror movies. I think that would have been a good thing for him. Yeah, I mean, when I look at Bray Wyatt, when you tell me, okay, what's Bray Wyatt's legacy? For me, it's like this, okay? So Bray Wyatt is a guy that was a victim of the Vince McMahon mentality of like, oh, we have to live on the Attitude Era. We got to live on the late 90s. We got to live on the back of these big stars and part-timers. Bray Wyatt always bottomed out to the big stars. He was never chosen over Cena, Undertaker, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, even AJ Styles, even a guy like that, Bray Wyatt always just was like second fiddle, It was almost like used against him that he was a homegrown star from this day and age, He didn't have like either of the two things that WWE was looking for at the time when he was a big star from 2013 to 2020. Basically, he didn't have the indie cred that WWE wanted. He didn't have the star power from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s that WWE wanted. So he was just kind of out of the shuffle,
Yeah.
I think if you put Bray Wyatt in another era, you put him in the 80s, let's say you put him in the late 80s, right? Bray Wyatt's one of the biggest stars in wrestling, bar none, at that time. Like, Bray Wyatt would have been a name that we would look back at, like we look at Mr. Perfect or Macho Man or Rick Rude from that era, And that's kind of what he is to this era, really. He's that second tier with the like a Mr. Perfect, like a Razor Ramon, like a guy like that, like from the early 2000s. You look at like a Shelton Benjamin,
Yeah.
That's like what Bray Wyatt is, But in the 80s, I think he would have been a big star. He would have been on Hogan's level. Him and Hogan and Bray Wyatt could have drawn a ton of money in the 80s and 90s. He would have been one of those guys that's marching down to the ring to take the leg drop, pal. And the whole arena would have been sold out, So, just one of the most creative minds, one of the most unique characters, one of the most over the top, and one of the best characters I've ever seen grace my screen on a wrestling show.
Have you seen or heard what Vince Russo says about Bray Wyatt?
No.
It basically says if that guy was, if it's 1995, 1996, 97, 98, I'm writing the show, that is one of the biggest stars in the world.
I can see it.
I have no doubt about it. I have no doubt about it. I think and what you're alluding to there, like Bray was almost a victim of the environment. With, I mean, you say Vince McMahon, but like the climate of WWE, the creative, no one there, no writer getting it. I think like someone like Russo, he gets maligned. Obviously, there's WCW, there's a lot of stuff with like Russo, but something like Wyndham, imagine just them sitting in a room for 2 hours. They craft some of the best stories ever in wrestling, and they produce them and they execute it accordingly. And like they get it. I just feel like no one or hardly anyone besides Wyndham himself understood his vision, and that's ultimately what sort of led to what we got, where it was almost moments. It was some cool stuff, but then a month later, it's like what was that? Why have they done that after they've and that sort of became Bray Wyatt. A career of, to me, what could have been. Like, I mean, I look at Wyatt, he's really the main example in the modern era. I look at like Dean Ambrose as well. Someone like that. You talk about like waste, like he, this great talent, and it's become in WWE for Dean Ambrose, it was, oh, he's going to spray barbecue sauce. He's crazy. Oh, he's going to put the tongs on your balls, pal. It's like, who thinks of this?
He's crazy.
He's crazy, pal. Ooh. Like,
yeah. Come on. All right, so we'll close with this.
Yeah.
I just want to say this to Bray Wyatt, about Bray Wyatt, not to Bray Wyatt, about Bray Wyatt. One of the guys that I'll never forget, and as a wrestling fan, he'll live on forever in all of our hearts. He made a lasting impact on this business forever. And some of that stuff that's going to live on forever is infamous, and a lot of it's good. Some of it's infamous, but he's still going to live on. He's still going to be forever in our hearts as wrestling fans. It's kind of somber. It's kind of a sour note that we have to do this. Not have to do this, like you said, but that we are here talking about Bray Wyatt the way that we are. Never thought we would so early, I thought Bray Wyatt would be one of those guys that I'd be watching in 20 years, doing shoot interviews, talking about what it was like dealing with Roman Reigns backstage or Samoa Joe or something like that. That was like, I just thought he would be such a great storyteller. I think he'd be one of the best shoot interview guys in the history of that business.
Yeah.
I can't picture a guy like telling better stories of Bray Wyatt. It's unfortunate that we're not going to get to hear those backstage stories. So, but what we did get from him was great, and he left a hell of a legacy behind.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say, I mean, obviously, yeah, we know the storyteller he is, and it's just unbelievable. But I think the other thing, which, I mean, this is getting touched on by all the wrestlers who've worked with him, all the people who've had contact with him, is just like, this is just one of the good people of wrestling as well.
Yeah.
Like, as Kevin, I mean, your channel particularly, Wrestling Uncovered, goes into, there are some scumbags in this industry. There are some people who are shady, lie through their teeth, politics, all of it. Windham Rotunda is not one of those people.
No.
Wyndham, you don't hear a bad word about him, and it's not like people are suppressing it, but they're agreeing that. No, people don't have some bad stuff to say about him. He's one of the nice guys, and from it's a personal experience sort of thing. When I made my video, Let Me In, the transformation of Bray Wyatt, early 2021, and Bray Wyatt himself, that account, he's like 1 point something million followers on Twitter. Bray, Wyndham the person, like that, tweet of that video. He's seen the video I made on him. Wyndham's watched that, which is unbelievable. So yeah, I just want to say, rest in peace, Wyndham. On behalf of everyone, obviously yourself, and just the community generally, everyone who's enjoyed your work and been around with you, obviously he'll be missed. It's a big loss for wrestling. It really is. As we started the show by saying, some wrestlers and people generally live their whole lives, and Terry Funk, once again, wrestlers out who are 80, they've done their career, they've done their life. But Wyndham had so much more to give, so it's heartbreaking that we even are doing this. That, yeah, there you go.